All right, we're going to talk about Unit 20 and land use controls and property development. I will tell you this chapter is probably one of the least represented, I believe, on the exam, simply because I would say this is more of kind of an advanced thing when you start talking about knowing the zoning and development. Now, you don't get me wrong, you guys have to be knowledgeable about local zoning rules to understand so that you're not client's not buying something that doesn't fit for what he's wanting. And that's probably one of the biggest things when you talk about care being your one of your uh, fiduciary responsibilities. And you're supposed to exercise reasonable skill and care. This would fall into that. If your client buys something that's in the wrong zoning, he wanted to have live animal sacrifices, and you're buying a house, that wouldn't those zonings don't go together. So you would have to do that. Make sure that so you have to be knowledgeable. Some of the things we're going to talk about are the concept of police powers, which we've touched on already. We're going to explain the zoning, what a zoning ordinance is, the different types of properties and permits, hint, hint, hint. Define some building codes, all the fun stuff. The regulations involved in subdividing and development. Like I said, this is kind of an advanced. And we're also going to talk about all the private stuff that we can do to ourselves. I mean, most of this is government related, like zoning, but we'll also talk about like CCRs, covenant conditions and restrictions. All of the stuff that we can do based on private stuff. So let's talk a little bit about land use controls. The government owns land that they use for like forests and parks and schools and museums and all of that. Other than that, you've got all of the private people that own property. The government still is going to control most of that for you. And if you think back on one of the governmental powers or one of the police powers was zoning. Zoning is there in place basically to make sure that you don't harm someone else. Everybody thinks about what zoning is, and they think about it kind of incorrectly because they're always thinking about, well, they won't let me do this and they won't let me do that. It's not really to stop you from doing stuff. It's more to stop someone else from doing stuff to harm you. I mean, sure, you might want to turn your house into a toxic waste dump and make $1 billion. But what about your neighbor? Wonder if your neighbor wants to do that. What's it going to do to the value of your home? Is that fair? That your value gets hurt because someone else wants to have? No, that's what zoning is there for. Same thing with the HOA, same thing with CCRs. They are in place to protect the value of another person's property. Because remember how comps are determined? Based on the sale of other people's property, not necessarily yours. So you want to be protected by making that person over there not have a toxic waste dump. And they would do that through zoning. Now, most municipalities have their own zoning. So for instance, Marion County has different zoning than Johnson County. And inside of Johnson County, you may have Trafalgar, may have a different type inside of than Greenwood. And that zoning is comprised in this thing that we call this comprehensive plan. A comprehensive plan is a plan on what the city or that municipality is going to do to try and control things from happening so that you don't end up with a slaughterhouse next to a housing addition. Okay? What I'm holding in my hand, it's not really a big deal. It's just the Greenwood's comprehensive plan. So for you listening at home, you're not going to miss anything by not seeing this because it's just a gee whiz. The one thing I will show you is on the comprehensive plan, see it says 2007 to 2027. A comprehensive plan is a long-range plan on how they're going to use all of their resources, the environmental resources, the zoning, housing, land use, all of that, so that we know in advance. For example, the next north-south route that is going to be developed in Greenwood is Sheik Road. You guys know where Sheik Road is? It's right over here by the White Castle. The one that runs down and runs south. Because we've already kind of filled out 31 And now we've gone over to Madison, now we've come over to Main Street, now we're on to Emerson Street, now we're moving out, and then pretty soon you're gonna get over there to Graham Road, which they're building all that industrial. Well, they know in advance, because of the comprehensive plan, well, we don't want any housing additions built on Graham Road, because we want that to be an industrial truck, what's the word I'm looking for, transfer spot, where all the trucks come in, and distribution centers. So we're not gonna sell any residential permits on Graham Road.
Where do you get one of those?
You can go down to the
Chamber of Commerce? Or
Chamber of Commerce and get one, or to just the local Greenwood. They are a public document and they have to give it to you. It's the plan on how the city is going to develop in the next years. So if you are a developer, you've probably got one of these, because you certainly don't want to go buy 20 acres on Graham Road and think you're going to develop houses, because you're never going to get residential zoning. They won't allow it because they've already got the distribution trucking centers there. And all of that is already planned out for the year 2027, according to that comprehensive plan. It's nothing more than talking about their land use. Do we need a church? Where's the new fire department gonna go? What about a lift station? Do we need water? All that kind of stuff.
helps you figure out the market. Where it's
Yeah,
going.
and it will drive the market on how it goes. So if you are a speculator, you could go buy the land and say, okay, yeah, I know that I'm gonna have to sell this to an industrial person, not like your home builder, because he's not gonna get the permits. Okay.
Those homeowners on Sheik Road, they're about 5 feet from the road already.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the problem that you get. 100 years ago, when we thought 31 would be, enough traffic, people out here on Sheik Road were in the country.
Right.
And now they've been swallowed up through that growth, which is the principle of anticipation that we talked about. Some farmer owns land way out in the country, which is now on the corner of Sheik Road and Main Street in Greenwood. And that land that he bought for $10 an acre 80 years ago is now worth $10,000 an acre, or
So-
$50,000.
Is this actually how it's zoned then?
Yeah, there's some
So
zoning.
like a logistics employment area, what you're talking about on Graham Road?
Yes.
Is that how is that what
Yeah, logistics and deployment, is that what it says?
logistics employment area?
Yeah.
And then there's like something that's zoned as Old Town area.
A lot of the
Advanced
cities do
manufacturing.
have that. Indianapolis has what they call CBD, Central Business District. That will allow them to kind of say, okay, yeah, we'll take retail or restaurant or a hotel or stuff like that. But you're not gonna go put houses in that logistics zoned area. They're not gonna give you the permit to build a house. And zoning that is implemented in the comprehensive plan is given through this thing called the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance is how we dictate, or how the police dictate, the police powers dictate what you're going to be doing. The zoning comes down from the enabling acts, so the state pushes it down to each municipality and allows for zoning. And there are many different types of zoning there on page 389. A lot of people think, well, zoning just tells me what I can do. Well, we've also got density zoning. Tells you how many people you can put in there. Actually, it tells you how many units per acre. So you can only put 2 houses per acre or 1 house per acre. We've got aesthetic zoning, like Woodruff Place. The house has to look a certain way. You've got setback zoning, so you don't want the house too close to the street. So there's all kinds of zoning ordinances that are created to dictate how we use the property. Now, when it comes to classifications, there are 5 or 6 zoning classifications that we're going to deal with. Obviously, agricultural, or ag, is farmland. Then you've got residential, commercial, industrial. They break industrial out different from commercial because of the environmental issues that are involved in it. So commercial can be retail, office, restaurant, things like that. But once you start dealing with trucking or salvage yards, that's all broken out separately, because there's usually an environmental component that gets involved into it. Then you've got special use. These are all the one-time kind of things. golf courses, churches, schools, municipal parks, things like that. Then there's that one they call a PUD. We've touched on this once before. A PUD is a zoning. It's the asterisk zoning that allows to do multiple things. Somewhere I've lost my marker.
That black one that's sitting right there?
Yeah, that would be it. So remember, we talked about Clay Terrace. We talked about Heartland Crossing. Those are examples of PUDs. It looks like you've got commercial in front and then residential in back and special use, but the reality is because it was all developed by the same person, rather than fight for 5 or 6 different zonings, he just said, I want PUD zoning, here's what I'm going to build, and they granted him the power. Now, we use these things called buffer zones to try and gradually change zoning, and that's their concept. It does not always work. I mean, I know a couple of places, and the one I'm trying to think of right offhand, I think it's at Sherman and like Raymond, right just on the north side of Beech Grove. There's a packing plant that touches a residential house. The properties butt up together, all right? That's an example of probably where, oops, we didn't realize it was going to be, and that's what they try and stop with this comprehensive plan. But what they try and do is feather the zoning, like, you know, the old 80s hair, feather it back,
Oh, yeah.
or starch it up with a whole can of it.
Aquanet.
Aquanet, yeah.
And the blue.
It's also called buffer zoning. Buffer zoning is zoning that is usually put in between 2 major different types so that you don't have a drastic change. Let me give you the best example in the world, and if you guys are Southsiders, you will understand this. You guys know where Mrs. Curl's ice cream is? Right over here, and I never remember. Is that Old Meridian or Madison, Old Madison?
That's
Or
Old
Old Meridian.
Old Meridian, and then on the other side is Madison, right?
Yeah,
Okay, in between that Old Meridian and Madison, there's a bunch of stuff in the middle. What is all of those things?
a library, a park,
You got a park, a library,
a school.
school, a church. What do all those things have in
Government.
common?
They're all government.
They're all government, but as far as the usage of them, what do they all have in common?
Public.
They're all mixed.
I love playing the game where I know what I want you to say, but damn it, you just won't say it.
10,000 opportunity.
They are all used in daylight hours and not night hours.
Well, we would have never said that.
We would have, you would have waited all day.
I know. It's fun though.
It should be like sounds like first word.
Sounds like 3 syllables,
Turn the lights
first
down.
word.
Seriously.
Turn the lights back on.
Help us out a little.
Dark lights, dark.
They are all used in daylight hours. So what you have is you got those houses by Mrs. Curl's, and then you got businesses over here, and then in the middle, you've got all those daylight hour stuff. So when the houses are vacant, that strip of land is being used. People at the park, people at the library, people at that. In the evening hours, when people are home and they want to relax and rest, that, all those daylight hour stuff basically goes empty. All right? So it provides a buffer from the traffic that's way over on Madison Street, and you can't hear the traffic. That's a great example of how they buffer zone. That's the best example I can even know in the entire city. So all the people in the evening, there's nobody at the church, there's nobody at the school, library's a little different, but nobody in the park. So that all becomes quiet land that acts as a buffer from the traffic sound. Another great example sometimes is if you see stoplights on a corner, and then on the very corner you have like a gas station. And then behind the gas station you got a strip center. Then behind the strip center you got an apartment complex. Then behind, or offices, and then behind that's the houses. So they're feathering the zoning quieter to the residential so that in the evening time, all those are now empty. The gas station's closed, the strip center's closed, the office buildings are closed, and now you got houses. All right? That's how they try and do most what they call hard corners with stoplights, is they feather the zoning out so that they don't get a lot of, a house sitting right at a corner of a stoplight and every day it's busy, you know? I just saw one today like that, it was for sale, it was for, on Smith Valley. And I was thinking to myself, you know, that'd be a real pain to have a house on Smith Valley, because now that's become a major route. There's cars probably going by all the time, you know, so it does happen, but they try not to.